Aditya, and in this series, I talk to some exceptional graduates of TU Delft to understand the hype and the fuss behind a master thesis. Is it really though? It does not matter in which phase of thesis you're in currently, we have something in store for all of you. From talking about the optimum number of coffees to be consumed to figuring out a thesis topic or maybe handling your social life, we find out from the best. Let's talk the talk, or shall I say, let's talk thesis.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Nagarjun, and I originally come from Bangalore in Karnataka, south of India. I did my bachelor's there in civil engineering. So I have a civil engineering background, and then moved to the Netherlands in 2017 for my master's in transport and planning, also in civil engineering. And when I completed my master's in 2019 November, I immediately started working as a PhD student here, also at civil engineering, also at the Department of Transport and Planning. So maybe also briefly about my research. So I'm currently working on modeling human driving behavior in the presence of automated vehicles. So in traffic that has both human-driven and automated vehicles. Yeah. So in general, I would say that there are broadly three different ways of, when you look for a master thesis topic. The first one is when you directly have a company in mind that you probably want to work after you graduate. So then you try to find somebody who you know personally or through your connections or maybe just online on the website. And you approach the company or specific department to see if they have any interesting topics going on and if they're willing to host you as a master thesis student there. So that would be one approach. And then after that, then you already get to know basically what are the interests of the company and the topic. And the second way is approaching directly teaching a staff member at the university. Just look within your own department, I would say. When you know roughly more or less what the topic you are interested in, speak to these staff members, and they usually would have some interest in being a part of these master thesis. And also, I would say that when you approach a staff member, they usually work together with some companies. So that might also be nice to ask them if they want to involve a company. So you also get the connection to the company for graduation, graduation internship. And the last way, I think, is probably the easiest way, which is to look on the website of the department where they have the defined master thesis assignments. The advantage of this, I think, is really just that everything, you know exactly what is expected of you, the research objective, the deliverables are there, and your supervisors are already defined. And often also the company and the company supervisors are also predefined. And for me, what I did was, it was kind of a combination of approaching a staff member and a predefined assignment. So I just happened to speak to a staff member at another event completely unrelated, but there she told me that she's drafting this master thesis assignment with the company, and the topic happened to be I was very excited by it, so that's how it happened. So for me, as I said, I had kind of my daily supervisor already sorted out because she was the one who introduced the topic to me, and the company in the company, the person she was talking to define this thesis assignment, that was also predefined. So and in general, in my department at least, there's usually there are 3 or 4 chairs for the committee, and they usually specialize in certain areas. So I already had a default idea of okay, who's going to be the chair. The only thing I had to think about was the external committee. I think in TU Delft in general, you have a daily supervisor, a company supervisor, if you're doing it with a company, the chair, and also maybe an external supervisor from another faculty. So there, I think you can be a bit more smart in your decision because of course, it's the requirement to have an external supervisor, but that comes with an intention, and I think you can really make use of that. So it depends on your topic. So suppose you have a topic that maybe overlaps with another topic in another faculty, but the research being done in that faculty on your topic is from a different perspective. I think it's really useful to have such a committee, such a researcher on your committee as well. They can give a really nice fresh perspective, but it could also do with the methodology that you're adopting. So if you're using machine learning or computer science or systems theory and these kind of stuff, you can go to the respective department, people who are working on that, to see if they are willing to join a committee. Then that also is really, really helpful. Yeah, backup plans. So in my case, I had an original plan, but I didn't really have a backup plan. But soon, early in the thesis, one of the things that I expected to work out didn't work out. So then I had to create a backup plan myself. So it was kind of like a realization that it's good to have always backup plans, if you can call them. But perhaps what is good to do is maybe see your thesis, your whole project as these set of sub projects, subtasks, and some of these subtasks are in series. So doing one subtask requires the completion of another subtask.
Exactly.
And while other subtasks can be in parallel, they don't depend on each other. So then you can go evaluate each one of these subtasks and to think, okay, what's the best way to do it, and what's the likelihood of this not happening, and then evaluate alternative options for each of them. So this is like a really very scientific project management kind of approach to it. But I think it does make sense to do this. At least in my case, I kind of did this once things didn't work out. So then I had to create a plan B, but then because of the learning from plan A not working out, I also created a plan C in that sense. Yeah.
But that is an important point, that it is to know that it is actually fine to be stuck mid-thesis, and it's very common as well, because if everything is going right, something is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's the nature of the world. It is very stochastic. I mean, so you have a certain goal in mind, and there are different ways to achieve that goal, like your master thesis. And according to you, a certain way is the best way to do it. And of course, things can go wrong. I mean, the decision that you take on that method is based on the circumstances when you made that decision. And these circumstances keep changing. So every time, of course, it's natural that things don't work out. And that is indeed a big part of the learning process in a master thesis. I mean, it is, as I say, it is a very beautiful ride, but also a bumpy ride. So it's part of the process. Just need to keep evaluating your decisions throughout. Yeah. Data collection. So yeah, in my thesis also collected data. We did a field test with cars driving around in the Netherlands, collected data. In general, it's very hard to say when to stop collecting data. So basically, you can either do a thesis. If you want to work with data, you either have thesis where you use existing data, or you do a thesis where you collect data during your master thesis. And of course, using existing data, I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's less risky than collecting new data in that sense. But collecting new data is itself very attractive, because it leads to more exploratory studies and adds much more valuable insights. But indeed, one of the problems would be then how do you know when exactly to stop data collection? What is the scope of your data collection? So for my example, if I give an example with transportation background, so if I want to study the driving behavior of people in the Netherlands, then I can think, okay, I want a sample that is representative of the population in the Netherlands, and in terms of age groups or gender groups and so on, economic levels and so on. So then I know more or less what should be my sample, and then I'm quite happy with it. But then if my objective is to not really have a representative population, but more have enough participants so as to statistically check the effects of gender or age and so on, then my sample size will be completely, totally different. But in general, I would say there is no concrete way to know exactly when to stop. But what you could do is look at previous research done in your own field that did data collection, and try to see what was their motivation behind collecting data, and also why did they stop, or why did they define their scope of data collection as they did, and also to keep evaluating yourself as to see what value is each additional piece of data that you're collecting is adding to your project. So just be aware of it. So in general, there are a lot of the thumb rules that are followed in the research. So depending on your topic, there's general thumb rules that you can follow. So for me, it's more or less like you need to have 30 to 40 participants, or more or less to have enough for a result. So it's basically these thumb rules that are there. That's, I think, important always, but perhaps even more important now. I think in my case, I guess I had a little bit of experience working during the COVID era in a way, because I work 3 days a week from home. I just prefer to work from home even during my master thesis. So in that sense, yeah, so I got pretty much used to it now as well. But in general, for motivation, yeah. So there's one aspect, as you said, is the part about questioning yourself. I think that comes with what opinion, or at least what level of awareness you have about your own competence to do that task. So in that sense, you can be objective about it. You can think, okay, to do this task, what are the required steps, and to execute those steps, what are the required skills, and then you know that, okay, so I have these skills, or to what extent you have these skills, or if you find some skills that you have to work on, so you can make a work plan for yourself, to develop those skills while doing other tasks in the thesis. So you can prioritize in that way. So that's very important to know where you stand with respect to the skills required for the project. I think often people don't think about. I also actually didn't really think a lot about it, about what skills are required, and I had to adapt during my thesis. So I had things like machine learning in my mind, but I had no experience in machine learning before, so I had to drop that idea, but instead focused on things where I was good at, and I did more with that. So competence is indeed one. And the second thing I would say is, maybe it differs per person, but the independence that you get, the independence that you have to do that you have while doing work is also quite important for me. So it's good to at least think for yourself, what level of independence you need. I mean, there is no right or wrong answer here. It could be that you want complete independence. You do not really want your supervisor to check on you daily or weekly. But on the other hand, you might also be the kind of person who says, okay, I really want my supervisor to, at least I want to update my supervisor once a week, just to see if I'm on the right track. So that sense also, your autonomy in the project plays a role. And depending on what your preferences are, it's also good to communicate this with your supervisors, to both the university supervisor and the company supervisor. You can say that, yeah, I prefer to schedule meetings once every 2 weeks, and not every week. Or you can say that every week I'm going to send you a draft report of what I've written that week. So it depends on what works for you. And the third thing, I think, at some point you also have to think about what is the contribution of work to the society in general, right? So in that sense, I think my experience included, we get at some point so deeply immersed in our work that we don't really see the big picture of what's happening. Like we're so much concerned about that piece of code that is not working to process the data. But when they take a step back and look, okay, so what is my work actually going to contribute to people around you? Okay, so if for me it's like, okay, it's probably going to make roads safer in the future. We can take precautionary measures to avoid accidents and these kind of stuff. Then you get more motivation. Like, okay, yeah, so the work that I do is kind of useful and makes a difference. So it's also good to keep this also in my mind. So this, I think, is quite important to think of in terms of motivation.
Thinking of it, why we started it in the first place, like why we started this topic, why we chose this topic, because sometimes we tend to question ourselves after a point in time, and like, oh, is this really what we wanted, or then it gets a bit difficult and we are getting stuck and all. But it's important thing why we started it, why we are so interested in this topic, reminding ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the problems you face when doing the project shouldn't be the reason why you question the project itself. It is just a given that you will things will not happen as you planned, as you expected them to happen at the start of the project. That is just in every single project in the world, and by default there are always changes. So I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you. You just should be ready with the right attitude that I just need to adapt to this situation and find the next best solution. So it's really important to be proactive in that sense.
Also, I think it also must be important to, in that motivation sense, to have a balance in life. That when to stop in the evening or have a timeline for yourself. I'll work these many hours a day and have a social life. Keep that demarcation. Otherwise, we can get burned out in that sense also.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think this is definitely one of the most underrated factors indeed. So I think also coming from India, I think we always strive to work more and more. Yes. Maybe it's just a stereotype, but in general, I observe it with myself and also the friends around me. you have to, you have to realize that the physical and mental well-being is super important both. So it's good to take walks. Now, of course, you can't do a lot with gyms and all that, but at least you can go for walks now. At least the next week is going to be sunny. So that really helps not only for your physical fitness, but also for your mental health as well. It is also, there's a lot of scientific research on this as well about your mental workload, and your brain does get exhausted. It's not that the number of hours you spend doesn't translate into the amount of productivity that you generate. It is just as important to have a social life, to be physically fit, and these kind of stuff. So that's more about your personal well-being. That's true. Yeah.
And then
so I guess it's more about these meetings, right? The milestone meetings are also your meetings with your daily supervisor. I think it's important, first of all, to have a clear goal, clear idea of what you want from the project. So this could be the main research objective, but also your research questions, for example. The research questions are something that you decide early on in the project with the consultation with your committee. And once you have that, then all you do is drive a logical conclusion from the research questions to the methodology, and then you evaluate all the different types of methods that are available and choose the best, have arguments for the best method that you chose. So then you go to these meetings, progress meetings, and that's what you say. So you say that, okay, so these are the methods that I found, and according to me, that this is the best method because of so and so reason. But what you have to, of course, accept again is that this is coming from your own perspective. So it can be that they say, okay, maybe that's not the best method. There is another method for you. So you shouldn't, of course, blindly say, oh, okay, I will switch my method. But it's good to have a discussion about why they think it's the best method, and is there anything that you see which they have missed while proposing that method. So it's just good to be open. So as I said, the objective here is not to. The objective can never be to have a smooth process. The objective is always to have a good thesis end product. So in that sense, you, along with your committee members, are working to find what is the best way to make that end goal, to have that good end goal. And also, it's always good, to be clear from the start what you plan, and also whether everyone in your committee has the same idea on what you think is your thesis. So that also really helps. And one more thing about these milestone meetings. So your kickoff meeting, your midterm, 1 or 2 midterms, depending on your department, and then the green light meeting. I wouldn't say I wouldn't see them only as progress meetings. I think at the beginning I also kind of made them as show your progress meeting. So I just try to present what I did so far. But it's more, you have to really think what you want from the meeting and what you want from each of the committee members in that meeting. And all of them are there for you, and they're completely focused for that 1 hour on your project. So you can, of course, show your progress, but also more importantly, you can ask those kind of questions that you've always been thinking about, you're not sure of, or some things that you really want their expert advice on. So that's how you can make use of these meetings. So it's more open. So it's not that you have to defend your method. It's just that you have to discuss more about what is the best approach to tackle this issue. So as I said, it's, as I said, you have to state everything very clearly. So right from the start, I had this experience also in my thesis. So I had a different conception of what this data collection process meant in my mind when we had the meeting. And then when the time came to actually do the active data collection, then I realized that, okay, people had different ideas of that. So that's why it's very, very, it's totally not, it's not a waste of time to, spend time to be clear on, I would say, the smallest of things that you thought of. So put them on paper and make sure everybody agrees. So be it your research questions, a research goal, the methodology, all the different aspects, your timeline. So it's all very important to discuss this and communicate this clearly and proactively with all your committee members. So that's how you do that. But of course, there will be some, so the company might have a different preference. So would want your thesis to go more in the practical direction, if you can say that. And university would want the more theoretical and more research-centered approach to it. So that is just how it is. But at the end of the day, it is still a scientific master thesis at the university. So it is expected. So you look at the thesis requirements. There is the matrix grading rubric and everything. So there it is clear on what criteria is your thesis evaluated on. So it's good to also communicate that if your supervisor doesn't tell you about this rubric, it's good to just yourself look for it and maybe have a discussion at the start. Okay, so these are the things my master thesis will have. But most important, as I said, is to be clear on the things that you decide. And it can also be nice, I would say, during these milestone meetings to do an audio recording of the meeting with the permission of the committee. And then after the meeting, you can make a short summary of the things that you decided on and then send it to the committee after the meeting. So things are on paper and you know what you agreed on. And it's also useful for you because if you don't record it and you just go in there, you get so many comments and you will obviously forget things, perhaps even immediately after the meeting. So it's good to record this and also send this as a summary. So that can also help you come up with the next action points for you, what you're going to do next. So then also everybody is also very clear on what you will do. From the whole thesis,
it's a difficult question to ask, but it's a very general.
Yeah, I don't want to give I don't know, some philosophical answer or something, but maybe more practical things maybe. So one thing definitely is the importance of presentations. I think that's something that I underestimated before. So there's, at least in your master thesis, there's broadly two types of presentations. So one is during your milestone meetings with your supervisors. That's one kind of presentation, and the other one is more public presentation. So towards the end, the defense, or maybe you do a presentation in between at the company to show what you're doing. And what I saw was you get too focused on yourself when you are making these presentations, when you're preparing these presentations. But it's very good to take into account what you want the audience to take away from your presentation. So if it's the milestone meetings, it can be that you want, as I said, you have certain specific issues that that specific people in the committee can contribute to or are experts in. So then you can include that in your presentation and may make that the central element, as I said before, and not really more on your own progress. But if it's a public presentation where you have to show your research, then again, it's not important to put all that you've done on the slides, but it's more important to think about what will the audience remember from your presentation. Especially with the final presentations, it is virtually impossible to put all eight months of work in that 20 minutes of presentation. So you have to pick and choose. So good to acknowledge that you have to pick and choose and try to think, okay, what is exactly the message or messages that I want my audience to take? And how do I make that process as easy as possible for them? So that is the objective of your final presentation. So that's definitely one of the most important learnings. And the other thing I would say is also because I said I had a few hiccups during the master thesis process. I kind of gave you I was already told you this before, that then I started to realize that, okay, it's not that things don't happen the way that you expected them to, then you're doing something wrong. It's not that you do something wrong. It's just that, yeah, that's the nature of things. So you always need to keep evaluating things. And there is always a way to get to that goal if one of the ways fail. Yeah. And now I kind of also now told a bit philosophy now.
It's a bit needed.
Trying to avoid that. Trying to avoid that. So in terms of academically speaking, I guess one way to be ambitious would be to try aim for a cum laude. So that's you would want a thesis grade of 8.5 or higher. So if you want that, then one thing for sure is that there has to be a strong academic or research focus in your thesis. That's one thing. And it's very important, I would say, to already mention that you are trying to aim for a cum laude to your committee, or at least a daily supervisor. So then, because the cum laude is not something that you can work towards the end of your thesis. It is something that you have to do from the start of your thesis. So then you would need the right kind of guidance. So, and the supervisors would know exactly what is the kind of work expected if you were aiming for this cum laude. And it's not just the research, as I said, it's also the role of the company as well in the cum laude. If you see the grading rubric, there is also how you performed at the company and how useful are your results. That is also part of the grading rubric. So in that sense, it's good to be clear about this and try to get as much guidance as possible on how you can achieve that goal. One more thing that you can always do, be it cum laude or not, is to try to convert your thesis into a research paper that you can send to a journal. Because on one hand, if you have an academic interest in the future, it does help you, of course. But either ways, it does put your work much more, it makes your work much more visible in the world, in the research community, but also in practical policymakers or industry. These people also refer to a lot of academic journals and academic literature. And you are doing 6 to 9 months of work anyways, and you are writing this, 100-page report anyway. So you might as well try to convert that into a nice journal, a nice paper, and then send it to a journal. So you could, for instance, structure your thesis in the same way as you would a paper, or also maybe each chapter you write, you can try to summarize it, each chapter. So then that helps you in the workload towards the end, trying to make this paper. Yeah.